Okay, as people know, we had the election and got the results earlier this month, and we do have one outgoing board member. He's here tonight, so John Jones, if you'd like to come up.
Like, I think we'll do it here if you don't mind, unless you want to watch the. Okay, we'll take you on camera over here. So we have, and then you can use the mic if you want. So we have a cheese board, I think it is, on here with the Whitnall Falcon. There's also some accessories that Kathy has in there with the box and everything that goes with it. So it was engraved here at the school with the Falcon on there. So that's sort of our token for from the Whitnall community, students, staff, and everything for your service on the school board. So I'd like to give that to you.
Thanks very much.
You bet.
Listen, I just wanted to appreciate, I want to thank the district residents, parents for supporting me for 6 years on the board, and for the board members. Never been a day where I doubted why you guys are here, and I appreciate it. We may not have always not always agreed, but I never doubted why any of you guys were here, and you're here for the same reason I was. And I hope you guys can, I know you guys will keep that focus on the kids. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate it, guys. Yeah. Yeah, whatever works for you. Did you get one with my boys?
You don't have a voice yet, Jesse, so it doesn't work.
Everybody, in case you don't know, this is a high school senior. I'm sure it's been a while since so many people have seen a high school senior. So, thanks very much.
Virtual.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, and now we'll move on to the administration of oath of office to newly elected board members, Jonathan Cagle, Jesse Stahoyak, and Nancy Zaborowski, and that'll be done by the clerk, Kevin Stahoyak.
Where do you want me to stand for this to make this okay? I'm waiting to, where do I go for this?
So you tell me what you're doing.
Should I stand on the side and you want to stand there? I can just hold this. No, that way you can have like a nice angle over here. Yeah, it'll be a nice little triangle.
Are you gonna spread your germs now, huh, Jesse?
Put my hands there since I got in here. Are we all settled here? All right. So you can repeat after me if you raise your right hand, please. I state your name. Have been elected or appointed to the office of school board member. But have not yet entered upon the duties thereof. Swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin. And will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability. So help me God. Congratulations.
Jesse, I don't think your mic is on.
It won't stay on.
Sabotage.
Oh,
I
okay.
see.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so congratulations, Jesse, on joining the board. Congratulations, Nancy, on re-election.
Congratulations,
Jonathan.
Thank you. So now moving on to 5, annual organization of the board, election of officers. It'll be chaired by the senior member, Nancy Zaborowski.
Quinn really got out of that one, didn't he?
It's close.
Okay, so let's start with president. Do we have any nominations for president?
I'd like to nominate Jonathan Cagle.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
And Jonathan, would you accept?
I would, thank you.
Are there any other nominations for president?
I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Can we second again?
I'll second for that. And did you second?
Like, sure.
Okay. All right, and Karen, would you accept that? Obviously, right? And one more time, any other nominations for president? Kathy, you need paper?
Now there's two microphones.
Yeah, two broken microphones.
Holding my sign. I want to be after Quinn. So it's like it slowly improves. I put a little more, he puts
Okay,
one color, I
thank
put a
you.
little more color, and we slowly get better. There's like lines.
The whole piece or a small piece? You just rip it off or the whole piece?
I want to vote in marker.
Just don't use yellow.
You get your steps in tonight. Are you gonna tally them and then tell me?
Sort of like water.
Okay, so with the vote of 6-1, Jonathan, congratulations. You're
Thank you.
President.
Thank you.
All right, should we move on to vice president? Nominations for vice president?
Nominate Quinn Brunette.
Is there a second?
Second.
And Quinn, will you accept the nomination? Okay, is there any other nominations for vice president? Any other nominations for vice president? All right, Quinn, unanimously.
Yay!
Congratulations, Quinn.
Treasurer. Any nominations for treasurer?
Nominate Stephen Boots.
Is there a second?
Second.
Stephen, will you accept?
Yes.
Okay. Any other nominations for treasurer? Any other nominations for treasurer? All right, Stephen, unanimous.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Stephen.
And clerk. Any nominations for clerk?
Nominate Kevin Stahoyak.
Is there a second?
Second.
Kevin, will you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Any other nominations for clerk?
I'd like to nominate myself.
Is there a second?
A second.
And any other nominations for clerk? All right, we have two nominations, Kevin and Karen. Kathy will come with her slips of paper again.
Green.
Thank you.
It's there.
Thank you.
So with a vote of 5-2, Kevin, congratulations.
Thank you.
You are the clerk.
Congratulations, Kevin. Okay, moving on to 6, comments from the audience regarding agenda items. Again, due to safer at home order, no public will be present at the meeting. Any public comments submitted by 5 p.m. on today's date will be read. Kathy, did we have any? None were submitted to Kathy, so we'll move on to 7, consent agenda. A is approval of March and April vouchers and vouchers payable. B is approval of March 30th and April 13th, 2020 school board minutes. C is approval of 2020-2021 CISA 1 contract. D is approval of personnel recommendations, and E is partnership agreement scoreboard. Would anyone like to remove an item?
Partnership agreement?
D,
So D and E. Would anyone else like to remove an item? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve items A, B, and C.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. On to D, approval of personnel recommendations.
I just needed a minute to review it, because I didn't realize that there was more added to than what was in our packet.
Okay.
So, I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, then I'll take a motion to approve 7D.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. On to E, partnership agreement scoreboard.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to all the work you've been doing, and thanks to Holz Motors for signing up, so, awesome.
Why is it only a 3-year?
I think we're finding a lot of people are shying away from 5, and so we've had a couple say, what about a 3? And instead of trying to push on to 5, we'd like to take the partnership that we can. So we accepted 3 in this instance.
So where does that put our time frame as far as, so the amounts that we were looking at were based on 5-year?
Yeah, they're based on 5 years, so it would be part of what Dave and I would need to do is go back to Holtz Motors after 3 and hope that they want to continue this relationship. I don't think it's something just thinking out 5 years, they just shied away from that sort of longevity in an agreement. So at the end of 3, we try to grab another 3 at that time, that's what's in the contract. If they do another 3, now all of a sudden we are ahead of where we were paced out at $20,000. If they don't take it another 3 years, we go reach out to another vendor who might be interested in that platinum, and do it in 3 years again. Yeah.
What did we agree upon as to the amount or that we would start the process of?
We're going to discuss that tonight.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else with questions? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve 7E.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. On to 8, action items. A is 10-year capital improvement plan. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, any questions, discussion?
Yeah, I had a question about the referendum that's possibly 10 years out, and if we could talk about that a little bit. And I know that there's several items being pushed ahead, but I had just had a question about, even though it's so far out, what our thinking is about that at this point in time.
Yeah. I think just like in the last referendum, there were $44 million worth of needs that were outlined. And you go to the public and you get the appetite of what that is, and it came back in that 15 to 20 range. So we went with a $16 million referendum when we took out the top needs from that list, and you created a referendum off of your needs list. I think it's the same thing kind of in this instance. So when we did the financing, we were looking ahead at a potential cliff in our payments. And so if everyone remembers, at the 10-year mark, we were going to see a decrease in the tax levy in year 10 in order to potentially continue to take on greater needs, take on greater chunks of the needs at the 10-year mark. So that's built into the current levy, to the current referendum payback. In year 10, the levy decreases, and would there be the appetite for another referendum? So I put it out there from a standpoint of clearly for transparency, and that these needs aren't going to go away. The list is what it is, and if there is the appetite by the community, to do a referendum, this is the list that is out there. So there shouldn't be any major surprises of what we would do. And on top of that, I do want to then add, since the referendum has passed, the levy has not increased at all. And so part of what we wanted to show by, having a modest, what we would call a modest in terms of what we see in the area referendum, we wanted to show that A, we could do a good job with the dollars that were given to us, and C.G. Schmidt is that close to finalizing the bill, and I think you're going to see a significant savings that we've been able to realize. So that's one. Two, that we produced good work both at HCE, the middle school, visible good work. And then three, that we're still able to manage the tax levy. So I think we've done those things. And, over the next 5 years, 7 years will tell, but that the list doesn't go away. It's still there. And to not run or hide or to think that all the needs that were in the last referendum are now gone. They're not gone. And in fact, needs continue to be assessed. So that's what I would say to that piece.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, I'm glad that you reconfigured it, right?
Yeah, that we took the comments, I think it was both John and Nancy, we added a little extra risk multiplier to kind of say, hey, what are the reasons for waiting versus not waiting, really? It did make it a little more of a step down. When you get down to like $20,000, $25,000 left in a budget, now you can't just go in order anymore.
Sure.
You're kind of looking down to say, well, what would fit? And so that's why you might see a few things out of order, but yeah, for the most part, the risk multiplier turned out well and kind of brought things up where we wanted them to be.
Yep, thank you for changing that.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. So then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Move on to B, middle school roof project. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Okay. Any questions, discussion?
One item on there that I was curious about, it talked about part of the, part of the thing is raising up the structures that are on the roof up to a higher level. I'm presuming to preserve the roof and accommodate it. And sorry, it's a weird question. I was just wondering if that's what it was for.
Hold on, I have to look at what.
It's something about raising all the structures up 8 inches that I just thought was part of the usual. And
Oh, within the quote itself?
yeah.
Yeah, I wish Todd was here more for that. I'm not, even if I read it, Stephen, I'm not gonna know.
That's okay.
why
I'll
raise
just
all the
ask
top-
him my question
Oh, the
then.
top of the roof equipment to 8 inches off the newly installed EP.
Yeah.
Probably just release pressure maybe off of that membrane, instead of having it sit on the membrane itself and maybe causing some additional issues, that while they're out there, let's raise it up.
And that's just what I was looking for.
Yeah.
It's something that apparently was missed last time, and now we're doing this
Yeah,
to extend the
right,
life.
right.
Perfect.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. On to 9, discussion and future action items. A is the track and field scoreboard update with Mike.
How about that? So Quinn's question is exactly what I wanted to raise with everybody before May. So so to date, we've raised $102,000 off of sponsorships, which is good. And we're kind of now an awkward time with obviously the pandemic that's going on and businesses being in a different space. And people signing agreements really when obviously this wasn't even on their radar as something to consider. We started to, in discussions with a couple vendors who we felt pretty confident would do some stuff. Now they're saying, hey, just with everything that's going on, not that we don't want to, but we'd like to wait and see where all of this ends up. And you can't blame any vendor, no matter the size of that sort of thinking. So we're at the point with 102, and we'll still continue to talk to people. We'll still, businesses that are still open and maybe even thriving in these circumstances, we'll still reach out to them. But to Quinn's point, I do want to get a sense of whether we do move forward with the dollars that we have raised to this point, understanding that we haven't raised all the dollars. But a couple things to consider is, A, if we don't do this now, we do have agreements in place that we probably wouldn't have any scoreboard up for the fall unless we get an agreement in place in May, allow for the ordering, installation, training, getting the all the vendors to give whatever they need to get onto the signs, and football season would of course be the major driver of why people are giving sponsorship dollars to the scoreboard. So if we miss out on this May window, it'd be extremely difficult to get anything done by late August or mid to late August. Two, with $102,000, you are talking less than half, 35 to 40% of the overall scoreboard, because we did go with the package that we went with. There are some potential other donations that could come our way to help offset a little bit more of that. But Daktronics wanted us to know that given the environment that we're in, that the 5-year funding that they traditionally offered at 4.5% interest is now 0% interest. And so in these situations, I certainly wanted to bring that up to everybody, that this is obviously a very specific time right now in which they're reaching for business just like anybody else. And so $250,000, 4% over 5 years, to avoid that and to have then these payments that are chunked out over time instead of all up front, which clearly would help us as well. It might be something that we want to consider as well. So I guess we're not taking a vote or anything. I'm wondering, is this something that is discussion worthy for May to put on as a recommendation to approve I would put it out there as to approve the scoreboard project, and take that leap of faith that we have a couple years worth of payments that we have funded, and hopefully it gets up, people see it, you get more, and then the pandemic ends and there's more, or do we, the original thought was we're going to raise this all, and we aren't going to move forward until we raise it all. But there's some circumstances here. Obviously, if we don't do it in the fall, it's reaching out to the vendors that have signed agreements, explaining the situation. I don't know if it's letting them, having the opportunity to get out of the contract if they so wish, since we're not keeping up with the timetables that are in the contract. So just wondering if you have any questions or a sense of, is this discussion and maybe action worthy in May?
Let's go around. Quinn?
I have a couple of questions, but it was just, so is the 102,000, is that money in the pocket, or is that money that is, like the 3-year deal? Is it money?
It's over time, it's not in the pocket.
And what do we need to start the project? What's the first year payment?
It would be a lease agreement of $48,000. So 5 years at $48,000.
$48,000. And what do we have in our pocket?
We would only have.
No, what do we have now? How much cold hard cash have we taken in?
Well, the first payments aren't due till June 30th.
I get that.
But so this next fiscal year, we would have about 25 to 30.
So we wouldn't have enough for the first payment?
We would not have, currently we would not. We have one other funding source that more than likely is going to come our way that would cover not only the first year, but a partial amount of the second year. So I feel confident we have the first year and most of the second year covered.
Okay. I can ask after, another question after.
Go ahead.
If you think we got the money, I'm comfortable bringing it back in May unless you want to.
So let's playing the oddball. Well, part of it is I feel like we should have the funding in place before we go forward. So having said that, if we get another source and we end up at like the 150, 175,
Okay.
do we have the option of scaling the project back to the less expensive option at that point, or are we
Yeah,
tied into the full?
The piece, so when we come back, if we come back in May, I would bring those options back. I
Okay.
think we'd have to realize that what we're offering our vendors in the contract are specific to the scoreboard that we chose.
Mhm.
And if we scale it back, just what does that mean from the contract point
Yep.
of view, and are we still able to offer what we were offering?
Okay,
Yep,
so it's possible, but it would be working with the sponsors.
yeah, yep.
Thank you.
I guess my question would be, what is your percentage level and the confidence of covering that first year?
Covering the first year is 100% confidence. More than the second year, we'd have to get a third platinum vendor or a couple gold, silver. We've got a couple people who are still interested right now, even given the environment, which is nice. So my first year, 100%. Second year, we would need another sponsor. I feel like we can get it, but just like our vendors, I guess, in this environment, I don't know beyond the second year. So first year, I'm confident.
And then all those vendors, are they local, or is there any that have a larger reach than that?
Our major platinum, our 5-year platinum is larger than local. That's Ascension Health. They're larger than local. But Burkhart's, Holtz, predominantly local.
That's it for me, thanks.
Okay.
Nancy?
I'm pretty comfortable if we have at least the first years and we can continue to go, but, so what happens if we don't need the scoreboard come September, August? Does that extend anything? Does it?
It does extend.
affect-
There's contractual language that says if we aren't able to provide, it does get extended to another time or another 5 years.
All right.
Or not another 5 years, but another additional year. Again, it is working with the vendors who, obviously, we have a good relationship with because they're entrusting a lot of dollars to us, and I think they would understand the situation as much as anybody else. I'd probably push payment, though, out, and so we probably would be front-loading, at least cash-wise, that payment until we would collect additional dollars. I'm not going to have vendors put dollars towards something that they're not going to see an immediate payback from.
Right, because, we don't know what's gonna happen come August if
No, we don't.
we're playing football or not playing football and
Right.
whatever other
Right.
sports.
We'd
and-
have to, I would feel most comfortable telling vendors we're pushing that payment out, and then we would front load that cash right away.
I do like the 0% financing though.
I do too, Nancy. It's the only reason I'm bringing it up right now. When they said that, I was like, oh, okay, that's not always an opportunity that you get, so.
Karen?
That's it.
I think it's fair to talk about this again in May and see where we're at with the sponsors. And then, I agree, I sort of wonder where things are going to be headed with the pandemic situation. And so perhaps next month, we'll have a little more visibility into that.
Yeah, okay. So I will bring it back in May. It's worthy of discussion from what I understand. I'll tell it to Daktronics. Their financing ends April 30th. That could just be a date. So I will tell them that we would be interested if you can extend this into May, this 0% financing, our board will take it up, so.
Hold on,
that's
Quinn, you have more
perfect.
questions.
Oh, yeah.
What is the interest savings?
At 4% on 250.
You're the math guy.
I know, I'm gonna get my calculator out. Yeah, 10,000.
$10,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so then we'll see it again, first meeting in May.
Yes.
Right, okay, good. Thank you. On to B, People Transportation Contract Amendment.
All right. Chime in whenever you want. So we are not providing busing services right now. And our bus company, our transportation company, and this is not unique to Whitnall, this is everywhere, surveys, discussions going on galore over this particular topic. And that is transportation companies reaching out to districts, trying to negotiate some sort of payment between March 15th and the end of the year to cover predominantly fixed costs of the transportation companies for what they were planning as revenue for the year. Okay, so again, we act in a consortium with 3 other districts. We have Greendale, Greenfield, and Franklin ourselves, who have one contract under First Student. And so they approached us originally wanting to have nearly full payment in order to keep staff on and continue to service buses, prepare for next year. All the buses that were bought at the beginning of the year, they had fixed costs for. So that was the initial discussion. We backed off of that predominantly when they realized what unemployment benefits were, and ended up asking for 60% of their contract without some labor costs that were now involved. Further discussion, we came back as a consortium at a 40% contract for the remainder of the year. The consortium as a whole, along with First Student, settled on 50%. That doesn't mean that's what we're paying. It means that's what the consortium felt comfortable with, at least bringing back to the board and starting a discussion. So this is a contract that was agreed to by the board. It was acted on by the board, so now an amendment should be acted on by the board as well in this specific case. There are districts all over the board on whether they're going to pay their transportation company or not. Districts have said absolutely not. Other districts have this particular language in the contract itself, that if there is not school, this is what you pay. So on school closure days for snow days, we don't pay anything. It's not in our contract to pay. Others still have to pay the 85, 90% of the contractual day, because that's how it's broken out, like by route and by day, minus fuel costs, okay?
Is that with the same company?
No.
So other districts have that agreement with other busing companies, not the one that we contract with?
Correct.
Okay.
It appears for the most part that First Student does not have that language in with anybody, where other districts, not everybody, but
other providers.
There are other, there are others that clearly did, for whatever reason, that language was in there. Would you like to add? We have gone.
I was just gonna say, so was it WASB or SWSA 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was both, actually.
So in it, they talked about this, and one of the caveats they brought up is getting some sort of written guarantee that if we do pay the money to the busing company, that they're agreeing to not lay off their staff. Because that's happened where some districts have paid, the busing company has then laid off the staff, and they can't get an explanation or accounting for where that money actually goes. So one of the things that they wanted to make sure districts are doing was to have some sort of agreement in place declaring what they're gonna do with their employees.
Their staff has been furloughed. For the most part, their drivers have been furloughed. What they're asking to keep on it are a few techs and someone to be in the office actually running that terminal. So we're talking about the Muskego terminal specifically. So they had originally asked for essentially 90%. That was to keep all staff drivers on and just essentially minus fuel, which is like nothing now anyway. So that was the original ask. Everyone knows that the unemployment benefits right now are amped up. And so it was just a matter of time before people figured out, like, well, wait a second, if we don't have any work, they can be made whole or more. So the employees have been furloughed already. What we have asked for, and I think it's an empty ask because I don't really know how to monitor this, is if there are federal dollars that come First Student's way that get directed back to the Muskego terminal, that we would get our share, but there's really no, and First Student is a national company. I mean, for them to go, well, the Muskego terminal, you get your $4.50 from however that breaks out, that's really tough to do. That's the only guarantee. I mean, there's a couple more guarantees, but that's the main guarantee that we have in there.
Is there any, I mean, does the percentage they're requesting make sense based on the staff they're looking to continue employing?
So we originally came at 40%, because that was some estimates that we had done to say, let's take the average number of drivers, what we believe the average wage is, multiply it out by this many days. We settled on 40%. Their argument is that wages, okay, I'm going to give you a little more backstory if that's okay. When they initially set the contract up, they had settled on wages that was $15.50 an hour. When you have a really good economy as we've had, jobs start to dwindle in this particular sector, and so they've increased wages to almost $18.50 starting. That was never in their original.
Hold on, you said jobs dwindle or job applicants dwindle?
Job applicants.
Okay, that's different than what you said.
Job applicants. And so they came to us probably within a year wanting to renegotiate the contract. We said no. I think there might be a little, so that's in their argument that these wages have gone this high, and thus you're underestimating how much of our is fixed costs versus labor costs. And so that's where we went to the 50% in this particular case. So that's what I can tell you. In the negotiation piece, they said fixed costs are closer to 60%. I cannot get any financials. They won't give those. They say they are proprietary to First Student, especially in a year in which we are going to be going out to RFP, that would create some unfair advantages, stuff like that. So I can't get any actual hard numbers from First Student.
And we don't have to follow what the consortium is doing, correct?
We do not. The discussion on this, so I said, what if we don't? And the consortium was a little bit at a loss. I think it kind of came down to, well, if everybody else does, and they're able to maintain a certain amount of buses and keep a certain amount of drivers, we all would certainly, we being the other three, would have the first crack at drivers and buses that are available. And if you're scrambling at the end, you're scrambling at the end, and that's the decision. Whether that's a real threat or not, I think that's the major thing that we're trying to decipher right now is it a true threat that if we don't pay, that the Muskego terminal is at risk of no longer being there, or buses or drivers? I mean, we're trying to assess that piece of it.
So I'm going to share a little bit. This all came out of the CARES Act when there was guidance to school districts with the phrase that's to the fullest extent as practicable. And that's in quotes, and that's been used towards school districts. And that's the National School Bus Association really promoted that to all across the country, that phrase, by saying you need to talk to your school districts, because this phrase, if they want any of this money, they have to be doing that, which includes us as a contractor. So there was some, immediately out of the gate after the CARES Act was there, that school districts need to be paying all of their contractors. Since then, legal has weighed in and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Unless you own your own school buses, and some districts do, we do not, that's different. Some districts, we now have brought all food service in-house. That wasn't the case before, even though the majority of employees are. So things like food services or buses in which that's a contracted services, the legal interpretation is that that's outside of, to the fullest extent, practicable. And as far as who do you pay for contractors? And so that does not mean that, but I think that the National School Bus Association, their professional association, got on that pretty fast and tried to tell people that they need to say that they get that. To Mike's point, I think once they realized that the federal unemployment was a benefit to all of them, and it didn't make sense so a lot of them have sort of backed off from that. As recent as the very end of last week, we were told to be very cautious about the contracts with this language, to make sure that you vetted it very well, that there is no urgency in settling it, because we all are very unsure of what any of this means. And we'll get into it a little bit later when we talk about legislation and the fiscal impact, but we as districts are being asked to say, what have you spent money on? The politics of things right now is that we're supposed to be using money because we are funded this year through taxpayer dollars. However, we also have to report by November to legislators what we didn't spend money on that we budgeted for, implying that that will then be taken away from us. So in terms of your own budget, if you're thinking about, if I know I have to save for a rainy day coming up because I already can see the storm, why would I spend money on something at this immediate moment, knowing I might need money in the future, when it seems like something that you could save on and there might be a risk? We can't get the actual details of, would you really close a terminal, and what would you do with all of those buses, since most bus companies exist to serve school districts. It's a risk, but at the same time, I don't know what the overhead rate, what is a typical industry standard overhead for a bus company. That's why we felt at 40% that would be, if they're running much more than that, since the fuel and drivers should be a bulk of that. But again, when you're from a larger bus company, how much of that is not kept local? We don't know that. That's the risk, but I will tell you that at the end of the week, last week, there's no urgency to settle this on our end. The trickiest part with our situation is that we're part of a consortium.
How many districts, how many districts are out of that terminal? Is it just us four?
Just us four, yeah.
Oh, it is. And does our fellow consortium members want to settle now?
I would say it's changing and morphing, evolving, as they're also getting information.
Well, we could say.
Mike talks to business managers and I talk to superintendents, and so you might get different messages based on that, because we're getting different information at different levels too.
So,
And some have been in their districts longer than others.
So of the other three, are they all three of them already slated to pay and want to get this over with, or what?
No, Greendale is bringing theirs to the board tonight to act on. Greenfield is not bringing it until May. Franklin's not bringing it to the board at all. It's solely the director's decision.
and their
And what is their
decision
decision?
I think I think Franklin is good, is okay with paying. Greendale, if you left it up to just the director, would be good with paying. Greenfield, this weekend for the first time was like, wait a second, let's think about this a little more. I guess my major pushback on this is, I get you're not getting your revenues, but when we don't get our revenues in the next biennium, because at some point we will be crushed. I mean, we will shut down the economy and not be crushed at some point. Do we have the capability to go back to first students and say, we really were expecting this amount of dollars, and now it came in at this much. Can we not pay you as much? That's my biggest pushback in all of this. Just the unsettling piece. And this is not fun, Tyler. It's just the unsettling piece. I have not gotten a straight answer about whether the mosquito terminal would close or not. To me, it sounds like it's more about preparation for next year than actually closing the terminal. But other consortium members believe they've heard the phrase closing the terminal. We've also each had our own conversations.
Kevin?
So the percentages coming forward about what, again, not that we agree to pay to it, but what we thought would be fair about fixed costs. Do we agree that 50% is fixed costs? That's what we settled on. Now the question is whether we pay that or not.
And there's no action tonight.
No, no,
Who
actually.
settled on? You settled amongst yourselves, or you settled with them?
With them.
Because wouldn't it just be us telling you, here's what we'll pay you? If we're gonna pay you anything? They
It
don't-
certainly could be, certainly could be. What we try to do is, in good faith, discuss what are the fixed costs that what do you need to operate this summer to be able to be up and running this fall? Well, we have these fixed costs that we planned on, that we're supposed to be taking from revenues that we're no longer getting. We're already operating on, I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I know, I know.
Operating on thin margins, all that
But I
stuff.
mean, if they're not gonna give you financials because of the situation, and we're going off their word versus ours, I can't see how our consortium wouldn't say, here's what we came up with, this is where we're at, if we're gonna go that way at all. How we can negotiate back up to 50 when we have we're going off of what we have, or they negotiate back up to 50 when we don't even know what they're going off of.
Sure, so I'll address that. So our fear would be, okay, let's say we pay 40 and they still go bankrupt, or they still close it. What sort of language do we have in place? Are we first creditors? Are we, whatever that looks like, and are we left in the same spot anyway? Without a terminal. If we pay 25, 30 years over to pay.
What are we right now? What does our current contract say we would be?
Our current contract, when there's no service, we don't pay anything.
No, but as far as if we were paying and they went under in our current
So
contract,
bankruptcy language.
what would we be, general creditors? We got nothing in there.
There's no language in there on a bankruptcy, no.
So I guess it doesn't really make a difference.
Steven?
It's a hard one, but let's say, I guess, looking towards the future, I understand that there are other bus companies in this area, so if the Muskego terminal goes away, we do have options. Of course, we don't know what price is and anything, but at least we have one more option?
Yeah,
Okay.
we would have to reach out. I mean, the argument that we discussed as directors, not as the superintendents, but as the directors, was, okay, so we could have paid 50, I'm just giving both sides.
Mhm,
We could have paid our 50 or 60%, could have the same contract in place. Now it's August, we're rushing, these companies know we're in it in a hard way. We don't really get to negotiate any pricing because they know what time of year it is, it's August. Where does that leave us, you know?
Mhm.
Yes, it would alleviate the year, it would help us in the year. There'd only be 25 days in order to get student info downloaded, routing, all that would have to start almost over with this new company. It leaves us in a tough spot. I wouldn't say there's no options, it just leaves us in a tough spot, and then financially, are we just worse off than we would have been if we would have gone, shoot, if we would just pay the 50%, you know, we could have done this, but.
Okay.
Jesse.
Can I interrupt here?
Yeah.
We need to negotiate from strength, not from weakness. We have the strength right now. When you said this isn't fun.
Right now, we do.
When you said this is fun, this isn't fun, you're in the wrong business. This should be fun for you. This should be, I'm here, I'm biting in my chomp to get at these guys. This is where we should be, we got the strength, we have the leverage. We should be negotiating next year's contract with this as a stipulation in there. And if then we'll know. Then we'll know if we have to go out and get another contract, I know how hard it was. I remember from the last deal, it was hard to get another bus company to play games. Now, we got the leverage right here and now, let's play. You four directors and superintendents, whoever does it, should be working language into the next year's 2-year contract right now with our leverage, with the money that you want 40, you want 50%, that's fine. But we're not talking any raises, you mean, come up with things that, you want it? Yes.
We attempted to negotiate 2 years out with no increases. It would not go for that.
Okay,
They are operating on too thin of margins. They will not do that.
okay.
It's not that we haven't thought of these things. I mean, yes, we try to say not only next year, but 2 years after, no increases. If we're gonna give you whatever the number is,
Mhm.
for no services being provided. We can't do that.
Okay,
Okay, so
Then
we
we-
can
then-
call, I mean, so if you're not gonna go ahead, all right. Yeah,
how many buses do we use,
we run 9,
9 buses?
and 2 special ed buses, so 11 in total.
Okay,
So so for example, Greendale, who it seems to be okay with this moving forward, they're running 5 buses. So for us, we're talking about twice the impact as to what a Greendale might be talking about. Greenfield and Franklin, obviously more buses than us. So there's a different motivation there as well, like, hey, what's this much when it's only 5 buses?
and have we thought about taking the service on ourselves? Buying 9 buses and having at it?
At $100,000 to $120,000 a pop for a bus, the drivers, I don't know if we can pull that together. I don't know if we have, I mean, we'd be talking, using fund balance at $1 million to just get our own buses, store them, I don't know where.
Okay.
I think it'd be really great to do that. It would be,
Well, I'm just asking, have you looked at the numbers and what it takes?
yeah.
Okay.
Jesse?
So you spoke on how, the consortium, the group of people, so we're not tied into that then, is what you're saying? We're loosely part of the agreement, but we're not locked in 100%?
While each consortium, while we work together with the understanding that all of our contracts are tied together, at the end of the day, we each do have our separate contracts. So what I mean by that is, yes, it says Whitnall School District as part of the consortium, but we each have our individual contracts as part of it. So I don't think, although we were kind of balked and hesitated, we're not tied into the decisions. Nobody agreed that we were all tied to each other.
So then if we decided to pay them something, we could technically come up with our own number, and it's just dealing with the other schools and figuring that out.
Yeah, correct.
And is there, if we did decide to pay, was there anything discussed like, okay, we're gonna break this up, we're not gonna give you that right up front, we're gonna space this out for, I mean, it's hard to forecast that obviously, but was that discussed at all or no?
That if we don't pay, we would no longer be part of the consortium? Is that what you're asking?
No, instead of, I don't know how it's all structured and what you agreed upon, but not giving them that entire thing up front, saying, okay, we'll give you, a smaller amount broken out over this amount of time until, a set date.
Their concern is for the
40%.
cost now, right? I mean, they
Their
need the
concern-
funding now to
They-
carry through the summer.
To carry through the summer is what I truly believe is happening here, yes. That they may be at a break-even point or just short of it, and they're trying to get the dollars to operate through the summer.
So Jesse, your question would be, could we agree to a number and pay it out monthly through the summer instead of doing a lump sum now? Right,
Yeah.
essentially?
With some sort of wording in there to say, if things go back to normal, then we can adjust it.
I mean, we initially did something minor like that right at the get-go, because they kind of caught us off guard, like, what are you talking about, that we paid for an additional 2 weeks? Like, we finished out the month of March at full cost, okay, to say, what are you talking about, we need time to think and discuss this, and so we paid out all of March. Paying out, though, piecemeal-wise, I don't think about what the benefit to us would be to necessarily do that, to go month by month, because at the end of the day, they were planning on getting paid this full amount by June 11th or 12th, whatever that is. To space it out in any way, I'm not sure the benefit necessarily of that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have
Nancy?
a question, I don't know if you'll have the answer to, but, so their terminal's in Muskego. Who does Muskego schools use for their buses?
It's not First Student anymore. Who
They
is
just
it?
switched this year.
It's either, I don't want to, is it Right Way?
No, it's not, it's.
Durham? Nah,
They just switched
they
this,
just switched.
And is that terminal in Muskego as well?
I don't know.
no, it's farther west. I think the reason that would have been more expensive for fuel from wherever the home terminal was for any of our districts.
It was West Milwaukee.
Yeah. And West Milwaukee does not use per student,
Yeah, they do.
but they're their own,
They're their own terminal.
and the terminal couldn't
I don't know where it is though. Well, it
house anymore, or? 'Cause
Yeah,
they-
it's over on Lincoln Avenue.
But it couldn't hold all of the buses that are used for
Right.
this concession?
I remember that, because it was, I remember the
Right
negotiation.
before, right before I got here, so I wasn't part of the negotiations for it, so.
I mean, I
Yeah,
do,
they had no more capacity.
I do remember how difficult it's been with the school bus contracts in the past. So, you know, I'd hate to see them go out of business. However, I'm not sure that, you know, if I had an airline flight booked, that I would have to pay the airlines 50% of my ticket because they need to keep people working. You know, that doesn't make sense. But, so, yeah, I don't know, it's really difficult. I just feel, though, that if we're part of the consortium, that we should agree with our partners and we should act as one rather than, I mean, otherwise, really, what's the point of being part of a consortium?
Karen?
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the amount that's listed in our packet is about $89,000, $87,000 that it said we would save. So if that's 50%, that's also what we would be spending?
Yes.
Or if we paid out
Yes.
all of March? Okay.
You're right.
Okay, and then, if I understand correctly, we are also contracted somehow that we must provide bus service to the private schools in our community? So
We have
that's,
to provide bus
State
services
law.
any resident, whether public or private.
and we pay for all of that out of the
Or a
taxes?
financial stipend, right?
Yes, or a
Parent paid busing.
parent-paid busing, it's called, yes. So, for example, with St. Mary's, we have to bus those 50 students. So we purchase a bus for those students, because that's what makes financial sense. St. Jacoby's, for example, they've only got 4 kids. And so we set up parent contracts for them that based on the dollar amount per student, here's what you get as a family, you take care of transportation on your own. That's for our residents.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some flexibility with that. That we can provide busing or we can provide a stipend.
Yes.
Okay.
correct.
Thanks.
Okay.
When would we be going to RFP?
Probably sometime late fall, maybe. We
So
want to
we
get somebody in
start-
place early in the 2021 year in order to think about how we're going to service them, how we're going to get routes set up, what sort of buses do we need. I mean, buses have like a 6-month turnaround, so we need something, we need to go out in fall to late fall.
Yeah. First of all, sorry for being a little animated there. So we don't have, when is our contract up with these people?
Next June 30th of 2021. So this next school year, we are still under contract.
So let me ask, if they go out of business June, what would we do come September? I'm serious.
I'm serious
I mean,
too.
could we start reaching out to busing companies now to say, would you have capacity to bring us on, because realistically, if they close, our contract for next year is
Oh,
gone.
absolutely. It's gone.
So if we reach out to companies now, I know we can't maybe not go through the full RFP process now, but we can at least say, hey, would you be able to accommodate us for next year? What would that look like fiscally? And then we're ready to renew, because then there could be some, like Quinn was saying, there could be some incentive for these companies to be more compliant with us for next year if we guarantee, not necessarily guarantee, but if there's a chance that we could sign a 2-year contract after next year.
The 2 questions that I have right now are, if Greendale is the same size we are, why does it take us 9 buses and them only 5? Just asking for fun. And second of all, what if we don't return to school in the fall, the way that we typically return to school in the fall? What will we be paying them then? And why are we not, we will just continue continue to
This
pay.
this would be the language during the COVID-19
Right,
pandemic.
we're gonna need 40 buses for social distancing.
Or you need 40 buses,
Well,
right? Or whatever the case
So,
is.
the number one concern right now at the state level is, even within a school district, if you could get social distancing to work, how do you get kids there, because school buses are the very last thing that social distancing work for. When you have 60 to 70 kids on a school bus, that is the farthest thing from social distancing. So, even if we were coming back, can they or any bus company, and the answer is probably not, there aren't enough buses right now, unless they're in constant, like the city bus, you're just grabbing it every 20 minutes to get kids here on 20-minute cycles, or whatever that looks like. So it is probably the top fluid situation right now, from what do you pay now to what does it look like even in the future, when you can't, magically multiply the number of school buses available to do that. So,
The other thing is legislation. The first thing that they came out was with that little piece that they were gonna have the Joint Finance Committee have control over money, right? And what were they gonna, the two things, transportation and schools. They're gonna hit us. We're gonna get hit.
Correct.
There's no two ways about it. They give us the most money, schools. Well, where do you start? You don't start at the bottom.
Okay, anybody else? So what's the next step at this point?
I'm gonna bring it back in May.
Okay.
We can discuss again on the 11th. I'll put it in as a recommendation of what the contract, what the negotiation was. Again, maybe some more things happen. We don't have to bring it back on the 18th. We could probably talk about it again in June if we wanted to. I agree with Lisa in that at first I felt an urgency, but I don't anymore, because there is the summer. I guess I do want to see maybe how some of the other districts react as well. Waukesha, so this is, I don't know if it was enclosed or not, never mind.
Can you remind
Waukesha and
me,
West Allis, Milwaukee both use First Student as well.
and what has legal said again, to slow down?
yeah, I think that because the National School Bus Association came out pretty aggressively across the country with a letter to all school bus companies, that they need to, and gave them the directive of using the language in the CARES Act as their leverage to make sure that they were getting paid their full contract, and so they came on pretty aggressively. And again, as all the laws are coming forward, it's taking legal a while to actually interpret it, and what does it mean? And now that multiple, especially legal counsels that specialize in education law have sat back and said that is not what that phrase means about, to the fullest extent practicable, because that is an outside vendor. They meant your own employees, to not deplete the federal unemployment and everything else that's being there, and that's the situation we've talked about before. So a bus contract in our case is outside of that, and so there isn't really a sense of urgency right now to resolve that, because they should be taking advantage of the federal unemployment situation for their workers.
So, and there was nothing else financially in the CARES Act for them, other than what everybody else was able to get through the furlough?
In our company, we would say yes, they wouldn't qualify for a small business loan, the specific company that we're talking about. That might not be the case for some bus companies. There are some districts that have a one-to-one, they only serve that district, but they're not owned by the district. They might qualify for a small business loan, depending upon how small. In some of the rural districts, they might have 3 or 4 bus companies that's owned by one person. And so there might be some other bases that came out of the funding.
Well, it wouldn't be the PPP, the payroll protection plan, because they're furloughed their employees, so they wouldn't be a part of that.
And
Correct.
they're just too
And
large.
if they are a
And
small
they're too
business,
big.
then they're too big, they're more than 500 employees?
Yeah, it's a national
If they do
company.
in national in this case, yeah.
So they are
national.
considered national, not the local?
Correct.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Can you remind me what the total sum we pay them a year is?
560, 570.
Okay.
Well, Mike,
Talk to me, Quinn.
560,000?
Is our, yes, how much we pay.
So, let's do the numbers here. We're paying them $560,000, you told me a bus is $120,000. So I mean, that, what I said to you wasn't that far off.
The capital outlay for the bus is correct, and then the drivers, the insurance.
I understand all that,
I mean,
right.
that's the ongoing costs that continue as well, but yes, it's just one large, one-time capital outlay. The maintenance of the buses that go with that, when something breaks down, do we have an extra bus or two in consideration, you know, at our disposal? Those are the sorts of things that we'd have to vet through, and I don't feel like now, under a crunch, is the time to consider that. Maybe to think about beyond this particular contract, if that's something, a direction we want to go in.
And how do we find out what Greendale's secret is?
I'm going to ask them.
Could be geography.
I didn't realize it was
Well,
only 5. I don't.
I don't know about geography, I think it has to do with their school start times, because that also creates, when you're able to recycle around and where people, it has to do with routing and start times of school, so.
Yeah, if we were running a high school, even with our elementaries, you have
We
to stay
also
with
have,
elementaries.
we have few, more private schools within that
We do.
impact the bus routes, and that's part of it. The private school thing, honestly, which, when it's a state law that you have to provide transportation out of public, you know, the taxpayer dollars to private schools, that's where there are winners and losers in that in public school districts, depending upon if you have any within your school boundaries, so.
And we only pay the parent stipend when it serves us right, serves us best?
Correct.
Yeah, when there's only 4 from to run a whole route for 4 students, that's not very economical, especially
No.
when there's a shortage of buses.
But have we ran the numbers to what it's costing us and what a stipend would cost
Yeah.
us?
Yeah.
And we're better off running the bus at that point? Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So then we'll move on to 10 reports. A superintendent's report.
Usually I think I covered all of my topics. I'll start with virtual learning, and some progress since the last couple weeks we met. On Friday, we sent out Bulletin 8 to parents. It was a big one. I mean, it wasn't long, but there was a lot of thought. So the bulk of the work, definitely last week, from building administration, district administration, was planning out what the grading looks like moving forward, that we're going to enter into that last phase now that we know that we're ending the school year that way. And so the last 3 weeks, we said learning will occur, but until we knew what that looked like and to what extent we were able to assess work at different levels, because it looks very different at kindergarten than it does in 12th grade. And so we needed to get that underway. So teachers had been scoring work, but had not been counting it toward cumulative grades at that point, because we needed to see what that looked like. And so then we needed to put forward a plan for grading moving forward. At our elementaries, we're going to give a benchmark. As you know, we have standards-based grading, and so they will get, you know, if it's proficient. It may be harder for us to assess exceeds expectations at this point in a virtual world, but is there some level of proficiency? We're less worried about the actual, if you will, letter grade of proficiency for elementary. Our elementary teachers are going to be really focusing on the narrative of learning and what they've observed, that approach to try to do that. And so it's hard at all levels, but at the elementary level, especially with our youngest learners, it's very hard to assess where they actually are. A lot of the work needs parent assistance. And sometimes it's actually hard. That face-to-face contact that the teachers and students have on a daily basis is much harder to do virtually, to assess how much of that is truly that student is doing that independently versus assisted, and to what extent does that make a difference. You'll notice that we chose the phrase "no harm" through all grade levels, that due to the circumstances of virtual learning, whether it's technology or whether it's home situation or the toll that it has on someone's mental health, we wanted to make sure that however we reflected the learning, that wasn't due to conditions because of being not at school, the pandemic, virtual learning, all of those things that are taking a toll on families in different ways that maybe they even unanticipated. So our elementaries are going to go with much more of a narrative approach to where students ended up at the end. and really work toward a transition into next year as far as the next grade to make sure we don't have gaps in learning. Middle school is always in the middle, and they have a combination. They don't get an in-progress cumulative grade that's calculating. They do keep scores on everything, where elementary tends not to put as many scores in Infinite Campus for parents. They tend to use things like Seesaw and different communication with parents. So our middle school they keep scores in there, but it doesn't show what the cumulative grade is. So they have been scoring work, but they have not been counting that to make sure that it wouldn't have shown up anyway. So they will be doing much more cumulative work, I should say that summative work, so when they get to the cumulative grade, it will be reflective of that. High school is probably, as you can imagine, the most challenging for a couple of different reasons. There are board policies that we had to consider that impact high school grading, and so to what extent that is. There's also some concerns with there are some districts that have gone to just pass-fail, and so that would, for the most part, require some board action because it dramatically shifts that. I won't get too technical if you like programming and mathematical things. The problem with going to pass-fail is there's this floor ceiling of ranges, and so you tend to go with the floor of a range, which is not beneficial if you're still calculating GPAs. So if a student gets a pass, is a pass at a D- level, or is it an A level, or do you cut the difference and go right in the middle at 75%, which then now you're averaging is 75%, and mathematically it gets super complicated. So that floor ceiling level of calculating things when we're still in a mathematical piece is the challenge at the high school. So we've gone to the approach, as you know, we've been working very hard at all of our levels, but middle and high school specifically having a 5-point rubric. If you've ever taken an advanced placement course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5 is passing. That is how our rubrics are for our scoring for assessments for students. So a 3, 4, 5 is considered proficient. A 3 score is at the very basic proficiency of needed to move on. 4 is in the medium, and 5 means you've sort of exceeded that. As you remember, last December when we had all of the grading at the high school, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 was people were still equating it, and so we did transition just so equated that to letter grade so people could understand that. So from that logic, we already have rubrics that describe what means to be proficient. And so any student that is scoring an A, B, or C, meaning that it's proficient, that student will be allowed to say you have the learning. If a student gets a D or an F, which means not proficient, they haven't demonstrated enough to be proficient, it will be an incomplete at this point with opportunities to continue to get the learning. So our goal is to not have students just focus on the points and what's the ultimate grade I get for GPA calculations, because if there is a huge gap in learning, that will be cumulative. If I'm a freshman and never got this big gap of learning and just did the points to get the score, that eventually will catch up. So students will have ABCs or incomplete at this point. Those D's and F's will be incomplete because we want to make sure through our no harm policy that D's and F's aren't due to the virtual learning or circumstances beyond their control. As you know, we have a higher percentage of students who have IEPs than the state average, and we've been working very hard with our special ed teachers and paraprofessionals to make sure they're getting served the best they can in a virtual learning environment. Some families are doing okay with that, but there's a lot of struggles with that that's not the same as having the support that they had when they needed that. And so the no harm is to make sure that that student gets that learning and that their grade and that their progress isn't hindered by all of the conditions under virtual learning. So starting next Monday, this is our transition week, students will be given a pre-assessment, and if they score proficient, C, B, or A, they can decide if, yes, I have the learning that's needed, or I can continue to learn until I get the grade that I want. If that A is the grade that I want, I can continue to learn until I get it. If I'm not at an A, B, or C, we're just going to keep it in as incomplete for the time and work through individually with that student. Looking at options of summer school, looking at maybe even in the fall coming back when we are able to physically be able to get that. So individually, students we have to figure out what it is that each student needs to get them where they're at. to make sure that the proficiency level isn't any worse than if they were here physically in your building. I mean, we don't have 100% ABCs right now, so we shouldn't expect necessarily that because of the environment. But we do know that there are a lot of students who are in different circumstances now that have created variables that are more challenging for them to work under. And so that's sort of the grading piece in a nutshell, although it took probably many, many hours to come up with what that is that seemed to make sense at each level. I think, as you can imagine, we have students at all spectrums and parents at that same spectrum. Parents who have said, my kid has given up, they can't learn or anything. And then you have the parent who said, my kid is still working 12 to 14 hours a day, wants to get 100% on everything, and is super stressed about this. And so you have this whole continuum. So to come up with a grading policy that sort of allows the kid who is motivated to continue to do what they've done, at the same time not holding the student who may, through no fault of their own, be in a situation that is very challenging for them to learn right now. And so I think that we've landed in a place that allows, at least for those extremes, and then personalizing where we need to for the middle.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Is it possible to not include grades from this semester in a GPA? If the concern is what percentage factors into the ultimate GPA, is it possible to just remove this quarter?
The board would have
Sorry,
to,
this semester.
the board would have to take action on that. It'd have to be across the board that every single
I
student.
get it, but is it possible to do? Aside from
If the board
board
took
action?
if the board took action on that, yes, it would have to be, you couldn't do that just for some or not.
I just didn't know if you could calculate it that way.
I mean, the policies that are in place around that are
Sure.
really board policies. Some districts, I mean, as you know, when we talked about class rank and all of that, they vary between how you do that or how you calculate GPA or weighted grades or not, or whatever it is,
Okay.
so.
Thank you, sorry.
No, that's fine. We did send out a survey to our families also, kept it relatively simple. We wanted to know how the virtual learning was going, what is working well in this environment, and then what are some challenges that you have. And then we also wanted to give a survey to ask them about the social emotional piece about the health of them. We gave an opportunity, it was an anonymous survey, but we gave the opportunity for them to give their name and email if they want to be contacted about better strategies around virtual learning to talk about that. And then also if they were struggling with some of the basic needs, and reminded them of our meal pickup and those types of things that they wanted one of our pupil services staff to reach out. And so we did have a number of families reach out. So our social workers and school sites will be reaching out to those who want some help around the social emotional wellness. It could be of their families or them, to remind them of the Aurora Student Family Assistance Program, which we've done. And then around the virtual learning, sometimes it's maybe giving them assistance on helping with a schedule, routine. That seems to be the number one thing right now, is encouraging families to keep on a routine, which is very hard to do, but is the thing that's most necessary. We have a lot of our teenagers who are sleeping till noon or 1 o'clock, and that throws things off a lot. And then families are just all over the place. Bedtimes aren't as normal and those types of things. So talking with folks there, but overall, so we had 410 families respond already. The survey went out on Friday afternoon. That's a large number of families to respond to a survey typically. And so we're reviewing all of the responses on there, but overall, some of the challenges are, they're not with the district, they're with the situation. They're like, we get you're doing it, but it's either my child, it's hard to get them motivated, or the amount of work, and that's the other reason we wanted to send out the bulletins, to let them know that that workload should be starting to balance and even out, because that seemed to be a little off in various places, and continually working with teachers to make sure that they understand just because they as a teacher can complete it in 20 minutes does not mean that a student learning the material for the first time will complete something in 20 minutes. You need to probably multiply that at least by 3 or something. So, good information from the survey. We gave a survey to teachers the week before, and that helped us frame the new grading and use the family student feedback. But this is really letting us know where our families are challenged the most. But a lot of appreciation for the laying out of the guidelines and what those families are going to need to do then moving forward. So I would say that grading and the information in the bulletin was the heavy lifting that we've done and that needed to happen, and that will take us through the end really where the emphasis has been over the last couple weeks in getting that out. Shared with you, and our seniors know that they can come and pick up yard signs on Wednesday. In fact, thanks to our booster club, just picked them up this morning. I did. I have a car full of them if they want to help me unload them, but here's what our signs will be. And so seniors can come and pick those out. So thanks to our booster club for donating the funds to be able to do that. The likelihood of having a physical graduation ceremony, the way that we typically do, even throughout the summer, it looks like that is probably going to not be likely, because I believe phase 2 of the plan has 50 at the limit of people together. So we're looking, as most other districts are, at options of what that looks like. So no definite plans there. Do want to get some input of some of our seniors and families. People have shared with us ideas, and so again, some of those conditions for which we can have a ceremony are not in our control entirely, obviously. The DPI waiver, I will bring that forward on May 11th, as I shared before with you. That is an actual hearing within a board meeting, so that hearing will be separate there. We have to allow the public to come and speak, just like we do our budget hearing. If people want to speak about why we shouldn't put in a waiver. I don't know a district that's not. There was concern for some districts who felt that they didn't miss a beat and went online like right away that Monday. Why would we even do a waiver? And I think the recommendation is you just don't know what you might do. Can you actually guarantee? And honestly, there could be some parents saying that the quality of education that their child is getting online is not what it was there, and ask for them to prove that the number of instructional minutes was exactly the same. And so it also is a safeguard, even if the district feels like they actually have achieved those number of minutes. There's also some districts were maybe contemplating ending their school year a little bit earlier than the scheduled date. That is also not recommended to do for a variety of reasons, but it may be somewhat political. But if we already took a pause, there would be no reason to really stop earlier in this case, and so we don't plan. In fact, our seniors probably weren't super excited to see June 12th rather than June 7th on the extension of the school year, but it was to allow for any students who need to get in some work who maybe wouldn't have in the past that extra time to make sure they get their work. Obviously, there's not a ceremony on June 7th, and so there wasn't some sense of urgency there. And they did have a little bit of a pause. Summer school, the DPI hearing has happened, but they can't say anything until 10 days after by state law. But they're asking, obviously, as I shared before, to try to see that virtual learning can happen. K-6 right now, that can't be counted for FTE count. And we shared with you last time what that means for Whitnall. Our construction is moving along pretty rapidly. It's pretty exciting. Went down there earlier this afternoon. We're in the middle of asbestos abatement that's going to start. The walls that were in the student services are pretty much demo. The one networking closet still has to come out. We're starting to get a feel of what that whole space looks like. One of the challenges is that because all of the school districts wanted to move their construction up at the same time, this is almost like June for them, like what June would have been in their typical schedule, because everybody's moved it up to 2.5 months. And so they were sharing with us the asbestos abatement company, I shouldn't say asbestos company, abatement company, that they have 147 employees and they're working 7 days a week, 16-hour days right now because they're that busy. So, good, but everybody obviously would love that buffer in their construction projects to be able to get it done. So we're definitely ahead of schedule just because we started 2.5 months before we thought we would. So hopefully we've not run into any snags yet with anything that we've found. I mean, interesting stuff, but nothing that's like, oh, like we did at Hills Corners Elementary when we dug up underground and found some buried treasures there. So we're on schedule with the construction pieces that go there. I think that's it. The legislative and funding stuff is very fluid, and it's, they're mingled. They're about politics. They go together, and so Quinn will talk a little bit about that, so we can save for most of those conversations there. But right now, the legislative piece is linked to funding, and funding is linked to legislative, and all of those types of things. So I think that's it
expectation at this point is that there will be some reduction in funding for next school year, fiscal year.
Well,
I think that's
I don't know.
premature. I think that's
Yeah.
premature. If you look at, even with the federal legislature, now, they passed 3 major bills now. I think the 4th is taking a look at whether they will support federal and local, or excuse me, state and local municipalities in some way or not. But the appetite is to continue to throw whatever amount of money is at this particular issue. But to backfill, whether it be property taxes or expectation of what should have been brought in. It is state law right now. The state law would have to be overturned. But as we were talking earlier, maybe Quinn will add to this too, that if we're not hit in this next year, and there's no change, we're not bringing in the same revenues that the state thought they would get. So there has to be a domino that falls at some point. Giving us a year buffer would be great to kind of be able to understand what that would mean.
Some of us were around when the budget repair bill came into place, and we knew what that meant in my first year as a superintendent, so welcome to what a budget repair bill would mean, so. There's some appetite for that, but there's also the reality that schools are holding their communities together right now also, and without that, and, you know, falling on the backs of them who are doing some of that heavy lifting of keeping things together would also not be, you know, great. So but I get it, there's not the money coming in, and so where does it come from? So I'm sure there will be some heated battles coming up legislatively on where people land. And so when we talk about, you know, how are you spending your money? Are you spending it wisely? And yet you don't want to get penalized for not spending where you thought you were saving it because you didn't have to spend it. We're not, the heat, there is no heat. Like, why would we put on heat in a building, and like, other than this space right here? But yet we're going to be expected to report what savings we had on utilities because we shouldn't be getting that money. So there's this like, well, wait, but we also had to spend money on this on top of it. So it's challenging. Like, you don't want to just throw money away to say you're spending it so you don't not get the money. If you try to be very smart about how you're doing that too, so.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you. On to 11, board goals, legislative and advocacy, the SWSA report with Quinn.
Okay, so, 2 things. If any member wants to, now that maybe you're off or you have more time, the SWSA meeting is a virtual meeting. It's on Zoom, and we can get you on there. You can, by all means, attend. A month ago, we've had 2 meetings now. The board members of SWSA are meeting every other Friday from 8 to 9:15 on Zoom. And if you'd like to, it's just the board members. We've had the fortune and good luck of having Dan Ross Miller, the legal counsel for WSAB, on both calls. And it's been a really good question and answers, and he's given us what's going on the legal end in Madison. So if you want, let me know, send me an email. I'll get you hooked up with the executive director of our division, of our SWSA. And the next meeting is not this Friday, following Friday, I believe. Yeah, that sounds about right. So if you want to be involved, let me know. The meetings are from 8 to 9:15-ish. So this past week, we had both. We had the board SWSA, and we had the board business superintendent SWSA. And really, we had our lobbyist, Rami, come and talked about what's going on in Madison. And we had questions and answer, and we had another person talk. And, you know, it's a lot of financial questions, and it's all speculation. It's really what it is. But they've got good ideas, like, we have to, by November 1st, the board has to send something off stating all this, what we spend our money on. But we also have, or what we haven't spent our money, but we also have to document the money that we are spending that we wouldn't normally spend to get up and running virtually, to clean the place, to do all those things, so we need to keep that in mind. Another thing is they suggested was that we make 3 budgets out, right?
Yeah,
So that, because we don't know
one
what's
of them
gonna
should
happen.
be right.
Hopefully. So we just don't know. And if I go back to the last meeting that we actually had for SWSA in person, we had the Speaker of the House, Assemblyman Robin Voss, there. And I'm not gonna put this very nice. They got it out for us. They really believe, because they spend the most money here, they do not believe that they're getting their fair amount of return on it. It's really, I won't ask Lisa to answer that or collaborate on that, but that's really what it comes to. And we have to continually prove along the way that why we should exist. Because we are taking the most money out of the state budget. So, when Lisa says it's a political financial thing and there's gonna be, it's gonna be. One other thing is they said is, because of CARES Act, municipalities have allowed, or are able to allow people to pay their taxes not on the quarterly, so we might be getting our money on a different time frame as well. So, there's just so many variables. The good thing about these meetings is those things are being brought up, and we have an awareness to it. It doesn't give us any security, but we just have awareness of it, and we have to plan for it and be ready for it. So, any board member wants to come to either one of them, let me know, and I'll hook you up and come. You know, so I've been able to work through this, and I'm driving around, and I got on my phone, and I'm listening, and I come to a stop, and I texted Lisa, I said, oh, this is pretty cool, I can be here and listen, you know, and work at the same time. Well, it's different, because, you know, all of a sudden I have to make a stop and see a customer or employees or whatever it is, and then it's a lot easier if you're just looking at your screen or whatever. So, while I got the gist of it all, it was a little hard to really comprehend all that was going on. And there was a lot of questions. We had almost 50 people, 60 maybe, when we normally have 20 to 30 live. So a lot more people were zooming in. So, but if you'd like to let me know and I'll hook you up. That's it.
Anybody, any questions? Okay, thank you. On to 12, items for future consideration. Okay, 13, announcements. Reminder that for seniors, sign pickup is Wednesday. And families fill out the survey, right? Came out on Friday.
We're also having something special this Friday with, it's the lunch program superhero day, so we'll be sending it out to families, but we're recognizing our lunch, our food service workers. It's a national, it was May 1st, it was always going to be May 1st. So they have t-shirts, that's the theme this year, and so we'll be recognizing it. And you may actually see some superheroes and other costumes who might be there too, so we're gonna make that a fun event on Friday, so we'll let our families know about that, because I think anything to have an event where they can drive by and see or be part of the meal pickup is, they look forward to that, having things to be able to do and get out of the house and make it part of the learning day also, so
And if we want to participate in Wednesday's sign handout, what do we do?
let me know.
That's all we gotta do.
That's all I gotta do.
All right.
Great. All right, anybody else announcements? Okay, then on to 14, take a motion to adjourn a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C to discuss final non-reports.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Roll call vote, Karen,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
Stephen,
Yes.
Always got to be difficult. Kevin?
Aye.
Thank you. Quinn?
Aye.
Jonathan? Aye. Thank you. Have a good evening.